All right. Hi again, everyone, and welcome to this month's Fatherhood Talk Tuesday. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. So today we'll begin with our standard housekeeping. Then we'll hear some welcome and introductions from Ken Harris, Director of the TA and Support Center. Then we will hear from Chichi Abianwu, who was one of the co-leads for the recent Fatherhood cohort. So we'll hear some of her reflections on the Fatherhood cohort. We will then hear a presentation from the Administration of Children and Families, Office of Family Assistance, from Seth Chamberlain and Tanya Howell. They will speak about some of ACF's ongoing fatherhood work, as well as the recent Fatherhood Fire Grant. We will do some questions and answers at that point. Then we'll hear closing and some more upcoming fatherhood activities from my colleague, Denisha Charles. So I'll hand it over to you now, Lisa, for our housekeeping. Thanks.
Thank you, Tess, and welcome everybody. My name is Lisa Hong, and before we start today, we will quickly review some housekeeping. First off, meeting logistics. This session is being recorded and will be posted on the EPIC website. All participants are muted upon entry, and we ask that you remain muted to limit background noise. We encourage the use of the chat box to ask questions or post comments. All questions will be captured from the chat box and we'll address as many as we can. Next, for audio, if you can hear me, you're likely connected correctly, but we'll do a quick review. After you join the meeting by clicking the meeting link, an audio conference box may appear. You can join by either computer audio or phone. To join by computer audio, click computer audio and you should be all set. To join by phone, dial the given number, enter the meeting ID and press pound. Then enter your given participant ID and press pound. You will then be connected to this session's audio via phone. Lastly, to access the chat box, please click on the chat button in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. A sidebar will appear to the right. Type your questions or comments into the chat box and send them to everyone. Again, we encourage the use of the chat box for any questions or comments during this session. That's all for housekeeping. Thank you for your attention, and I will now turn it to Ken.
Thanks so much, Lisa and Tess, and good afternoon to everyone. It's exciting to be here for our next Fatherhood Talk Tuesday, and I'm especially excited today as we are here with our colleagues from ACF. And just for folks to know that when you think of the fatherhood work and who's been occupying the space for 3 decades, because that's how long the fatherhood movement is in this country, about 30 years, but so our colleagues from the ACF will be here sharing a great presentation. It's really the beginning of our partnership. So we're really excited for that big presentation today. We're also excited to have Chichi, who was chair or co-lead of our fatherhood cohort, which we recently completed, have her here to share some highlights. And so we want to encourage you to think about joining the fatherhood cohort, the next round, as well as our fatherhood academies, things that are coming up to really support all of you in your fatherhood work, opportunities to look closer and deeper at the work that you're doing. We know that fatherhood, there's a breadth to the fatherhood work and there's also a depth to it. And so these cohort and learning academy opportunities give you an opportunity to come together in a smaller group to really go deeper and look at issues that are really relative to your communities. And so we're happy to have Greg and Chichi leading us in the recent cohort. So at this time, I would love to turn it over to you, Chichi, and have you share some highlights from the cohort. Thank you for being here.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay, excellent. So my name is Chichi Obiaun, and I am with the Detroit Healthy Start. We have a federally qualified health center in the Detroit Healthy Start. So a federally qualified health center, which is also a primary care facility. So part of our fatherhood services is also in the field of primary care. So not only do we engage dads prenatally and postnatally, we also encourage dad to make sure that he's up to date with various checkups and making sure that his health, his physical health, is up to par. But what we really do with our fatherhood program is just, what everyone else does in their fatherhood program is making sure that we're serving fathers who are connected with the maternal child health in Healthy Start, which poses some challenges. But what we've been able to do in the cohort is that Ken just spoke about was talk about some of the challenges of engaging fathers individually in the community, but more specifically, the fathers who are attached and associated with the Moms and Healthy Start. And that has been a really a wonderful journey in trying to figure out the best strategies to engage dad during this particular time in our highlighted zip codes. And so we really talked about that in the cohort, and it was really great to hear from fatherhood coordinators in New Mexico and Philadelphia and Chicago, and to hear the strategies that people have been using to engage dads. And I know that one of the things that we really benefited from the cohort is the fatherhood continuum of care that Ken Harris and co developed, that really helped us know when are the different times to properly engage father and to engage dad. And yeah, so that was really beneficial for us. And I think that everyone else got a chance. I don't know if everyone else got a chance to see the fatherhood continuum, but it's definitely something that we use and that is in our cubbies at work. But we're working from home, so it's in our own personal cubbies. But I think it's a wonderful one-pager that shows the continuum of care of engaging a father from beginning to end, from prenatal to postnatal to thinking about becoming a father, etc. So yeah, it was a great experience. And I know all the fathers. We have some Healthy Start programs in Michigan that I was able to share a lot of the information that we discussed in our cohort, and they really benefited from that, from the documents that we shared in the group on a national level.
All right, thank you so much, Chi-Chi. And if you go to the next slide for me, that'd be great. So just wanted to acknowledge also Mike Muni, who is our federal project officer working with us on our fatherhood work. He is currently deployed, so you don't have a welcome from him today, but certainly he sends his regards and support, and he will be back mid-month. And so you still, again, if you need to reach out, we'll have his contact information available at the end. But also want to comment and acknowledge Kevin Chapman, who's our project officer for our Supporting Healthy Start Performance projects. I know he's out there, so thank you for being here today, Kevin. So a couple of quick announcements and we'll get right into the presentation. Some of you were able to participate in a fatherhood training by NPCL on last week, 2-day training, which I hear was an awesome training. I was there for the first day. I was able to try and listen to a lot of you, but the content was tremendous, and we're really happy with our partnership with NPCL. Again, when we think of the fatherhood movement, as I said earlier, starting in the early 90s, and community programs that were out there doing great work, research and evaluation on program implementation, it was NPCL and Dr. Jeff Johnson. And so we're really happy to be partnering with Jeff and really making these trainings available to you. So I hope that you enjoyed that training and you have the backup materials and support documents that you need to move your work forward. So just want to acknowledge that and just give a shout out to NPCL. We have an announcement later on about the upcoming conference for you, those that are interested in attending that to June. So make sure you stay tuned right to the end of today's presentation. Next slide, please. Also wanted to remind those that attended the Building a Successful Fatherhood program training beginning of this year. And that second training in particular was really important because the main goal was really to help set you up to begin your year 3 program implementation with strength. And so there was homework assigned to these trainings. And so if you attended the training and still are working on your homework, please submit that. We certainly are planning to have certificates for those trainings, but we need you to submit your homework in order to get that certificate. So please, we'll follow up with you. And I know staff has been following up with you already. We'll continue to do that, but we really expect you to complete that training. One of the things that Dr. Brandon Wood, who was our former liaison at the Division for Fatherhood, he really pushed us to have this training because based on what we're hearing from grantees around the country, the kind of support that was needed really went into building this training. And so it's really essential that father coordinators attend that training. If you didn't attend it in person, definitely go to the website to access that training because it's really foundational. A lot of the requests that we're receiving now around outreach and recruitment and retention, that was covered extensively in the training. So please, if you have not had a chance, go and check out the webinar so that you can get up to speed, and perhaps many of your answers can be answered just from viewing that. And if you have questions or need support thereafter, please reach out to us at the TA Center. But please complete that homework and get it into us so we can continue to support you as we move fatherhood work forward. Next slide, please. As Chi commented on the continuum, we want to highlight a couple of things, but just to remind you of your goal, and that is of these 100, enrolling 100 partners of your Healthy Start Women. And as she said, and we know, the emphasis of the fathers that you serve are really the ones that are connected to the Healthy Start Women, because again, that's connecting them to the program the outcomes and objectives of this program around eliminating infant mortality. And so really working with the moms and the babies is an important piece. And then also the benchmarks, and we encourage you to continue to work on those. If you have any challenge with that, that's why we're here as the TA Center. So reach out and let us know how we might support you. Next slide. And so when we talk about the continuum, this, again, Healthy Start Fatherhood is fatherhood within an MCH program, within the MCH framework. So very different from a standalone fatherhood program. And so some folks have been doing fatherhood work for a long time, but not many have been doing it within an MCH context. And that is the beauty of Healthy Start. And you all that are hired now to do this work under this cycle are very in a great position, and it's got such an opportunity for Healthy Start to demonstrate what fatherhood looks like within an MCH framework. And so we just like to remind you always of this MCH continuum of care, which is used as we look at women's health. And just go ahead and click and populate this slide for me. But we talk about the continuum for fathers to align with this, and that is paternal involvement in fatherhood. And then we get into Healthy Start, it said before, during, after, and beyond phase. And so as Chi-Chi's talked, what we did in that cohort is really to look deeply. What is it that we do at each of those stages, whether it be preconception, during pregnancy, birth? What kinds of ways do we connect fathers to moms, the pregnancy, and then to those infants? And what kind of ways can you strengthen the engagement to increase better outcomes, birth outcomes, health outcomes, et cetera? And so it's really important that we understand within Healthy Start, then connecting them early. And again, all of this is based on the research and the early learning. And if you connect men early, the chances of them remaining connected across the continuum increases. So again, understanding what you're actually doing with these fathers along this continuum as it connects to women's health, women's outcomes, and birth outcomes, and children's health and outcomes. And so again, we will always emphasize this continuum because that's what you need to understand when it comes to fatherhood within the MCH context. So we're excited again to have ACF with us. And just a couple of words, we're grateful to our colleagues, both Seth and Tanya, for being here as we begin to build this partnership with the TA Center and the Division of Healthy Start at the Maternal Child Health Bureau. But as we think about today, I just want you to pause and think about 1912. Under President Taft, when the Children's Bureau was first established in 1912, focusing on the welfare of children. And so today's presentation is connected to that endeavor to take care of America's children. And from 1912, we moved to 1935, which is an important date for you to know, because that's when the Maternal Child Health Bureau was established as part of the Social Security Act. So just think about the turn of the century, we were focused on children's welfare. And again, think of the wars that were going on, so families and children were really at risk. And in 1935, again, focusing on children and women and starting the Maternal Child Health Bureau. So the Maternal Child Health Bureau, 86 years we've been doing maternal child health, but it's only in recent years have we focused on fathers connected to that. And so ACF, I know, was founded in 1991, and it was founded and established to empower families, right, to ensure their economic stability. Again, this concern for taking care of our nation's children. And so 1991 is an interesting date when ACF was founded, because that's when the first 15 Healthy Starts were put in place in 1991. And so we've had 30 years of Healthy Start funding, and it's only been in this recent funding cycle, beginning in 2019, that fatherhood became a required component. And that is a great achievement for the Division of Healthy Start in the Bureau, to have an MCH program that has fatherhood as a required component. So you need to know this is the first time that fatherhood has been a required component in any MCH program in this country. And so we're able to really partner with ACF, who's been doing fatherhood since the beginning of the movement in the early 90s, 1991, and then watching their work grow over the years. And that's what you're going to hear in the presentation today, is some of their programs that they offer. And again, they've been in this space for quite some time. And so it's a great time to be partnering. But pay attention and think, I've mentioned those years because I want you to think about policies that are in place that really impact the fathers that we think about in the Healthy Start population across the country, because their policies impacted father involvement as we think about 1935 to 2021. And again, welfare policies, changes in TANF, all of those things impacted father involvement. Some policies discourage involvement. There's some that encourage that. There are some policies and programs that support father involvement, and there are some that do not. And so again, having ACF programs as a model to lift up, and many of the leaders of the fatherhood movement helped establish the ACF and the many programs they're going to hear about today. So I'm really excited and delighted to introduce both Seth and Tanya, and I turn the mic over to them for our presentation from the Administration for Children and Families, Office of Family Assistance. All right, you guys.
All right, great.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you
Ken.
so much, Ken.
Go ahead,
Thank
Tanya.
you. Yeah, well, just good afternoon to everyone, and how excited we are to be here to give you a presentation about some of the work that has been going on in the Office of Family Assistance. So, Seth, I want to give you some time as well to introduce yourself. Oh, you're on mute.
I sure am. Thank you so much. Can we go to the next slide? Sorry about that. So welcome one, welcome all. So we are here to learn and grow with you, and really to hold high the essential role of fathers in families and communities and society. And we might pick up a few dad jokes along the way, which reminds me, do you know when a joke becomes a dad joke? It's when the punchline becomes apparent, when the punchline becomes apparent. So, you know, there's something unique that happens when a man becomes a parent, when a man becomes a father. So I loved that MCH continuum of care and the fact that it recognizes that men are part of this, that men are becoming fathers. There's something unique there that happens, dare I say, even magical. I say that because I'm not just a Fed, I'm also a father, like many of you. My two daughters, ages 7 and 4, motivate and inspire me, and you can see some of their artistic motivation behind me. When a man becomes a father, he gets new purpose, a new focus, a new drive to be a better person, both for his children and for the greater society. And I'm so proud to be involved in programming that lifts up fathers, that encourages fathers, and that works to promote strong, healthy families with actively, warmly engaged fathers. So there's a lot more to say, and I'm so happy to be here with a colleague who has been here with our Responsible Fatherhood programming since it was first funded in 2006. So Tanya Howe will provide thorough background, and we'll be looking forward to answering your questions at the end. And honestly, we're looking forward to learning from you, even as you may learn what we do. Which reminds me, you know, one of the best books on fathering that I've ever read was called Fatherly Advice. Have you read it? You may not have heard of it, but you've probably heard of the author. It's Mr. Upson, Mr. Buck L. Upson. So buckle up, son, and buckle up, daughter. There's a lot more to learn about our fatherhood programming. With that, I'll hand it off to Tanya.
Great. Thank you, Seth. So again, good afternoon. My name is Tanya Howe, and I am a Family Assistance Program Specialist with the Office of Family Assistance. So welcome to OFA's journey in promoting responsible fatherhood. Next slide. As you just eloquently heard from Seth, he is the Division Director for the Office of Family Assistance. And he will talk a little bit later about our learning agenda for cohort 4, which we are now in. We've just funded that cohort. And he'll talk about performance measurement, CQI, data collection, and evaluation. Next slide. Okay, so in the next little less than 90 minutes, we will briefly outline what programs we monitor in OFA, the funding for the Responsible Fatherhood program, a brief overview of the first 3 cohorts. We'll show data we have gathered from cohort 3 and end with information on cohort 4. Next slide. Okay, so what do we do in OFA? So we're responsible for the following programs that you see listed there. TANF, which is a Block grant that provides about $16.6 billion to states, territories, and the District of Columbia, and federally recognized Indian tribes. TANF supports and provides income support to low-income families and children. Next, we have Tribal TANF. That is also federally that's also a program that works with federally recognized Indian tribes. That allows them to apply for funding to administer and operate their own TANF programs. This is also a Block grant. Next program we have Native Employment Works, which is a fairly new program. It provides funding to about 78 grantees for a variety of work-related activities to support job readiness, job placement, and job retention for Native Americans. Next, we have the Healthy Marriage and Responsible Fatherhood grants, which we will be discussing today, and I will be focusing on fatherhood grants. Healthy Professional Opportunities grants, those are another set of discretionary grants that we have. We affectionately call them HPOG, and HPOG provides education and training to TANF recipients and other low-income individuals for health occupations that pay well and are expected to either experience labor shortages or be high in demand. And these grants are also for a 5-year period. And finally, we have Tribal TANF and child welfare grants. So to about 8 tribes and tribal organizations to demonstrate models of effective coordination of tribal TANF and child welfare services. So they are tailored to meet the needs of the tribe and improve services to families at risk of child abuse or neglect. Services like home visiting, parenting, and other prevention services are provided. Next slide. Okay, so promoting responsible fatherhood. How were we funded? Well, in 2005, the Deficit Reduction Act authorized, in the Deficit Reduction Act, Congress authorized $150 million to carry out healthy marriage and responsible fatherhood promotion activities. Under healthy marriage activities, there are 8 authorized activities, and under responsible fatherhood, or what we call promoting responsible fatherhood, are 3 allowable activities. And this acts set the stage for the first cohort. The first cohort was funded for a period of 5 years, so that was 2005 through 2010. Then in 2010, funding was reauthorized under the Claims Resolution Act. And this authorization actually authorized an equal split in funding between healthy marriage and responsible programs. And so now there is a $75 million split for each program. Next slide. Okay, so I mentioned the responsible fatherhood promotion, the 3 allowable activities, and those activities are, or rather I should say 3 allowable activity areas, and that's healthy marriage, responsible parenting, and economic stability. Next slide. What I've tried to do is break down each one of them for you. And so you'll see that healthy marriage has about 9 activities that an applicant could select. Also see the language of such as at the end. So an applicant could select one of these 9 or 2 of these 9 activities, and they had the opportunity to propose where we said such as, they could propose something that's not listed as long as it promoted healthy marriage or sustained marriage. Next slide. Here we have responsible parenting activities that I've outlined specifically. So there are 5 of those activities, as well as the language of such as, and economic stability. There are 3 activities along with the language of such as. So again, a program could also propose to do an activity that we don't have listed here, but that promoted responsible parenting or promoted or fostered economic stability. Next slide. Now, along with those 3 allowable activities, we also have program expectations that applicants would have to follow or provide in their program design. So definitely participants, the programs are voluntary, so it's voluntary participation. All programs were required to consult with a domestic violence expert. We also encourage case management. And then the curriculum they chose, we encourage that the curriculum be father focused. Now, one of the things in the early part, or rather in cohort, the first cohort, programs offered, we actually did not require a father focused curriculum. Some programs had curriculums and some did not. Throughout the 5-year period, we then began to encourage that those curriculums be father focused. And then we began to also encourage that they be at least 8 hours. There was not an hour requirement to them. So by the end of the 5 years, most of the programs had picked up, made sure that their curriculums were father focused. And then they also adjusted their programs so the curriculums were at least 8 hours. Next slide. Now, let me give you a brief history of the 3 cohorts. So we have the first cohort, where we awarded 95 awards between the amounts of $250,000 to $2 million. And in the first cohort, we require programs to either select a single activity or multiple allowable activities. And what I mean by that is, in the earlier slides where I outlined all of the activities for you under healthy marriage, parenting, and economic stability. Well, we wrote the RFP at the time was called, now they're called funding opportunity announcements, but we wrote the RFP so that a program could propose to either provide one single activity. So if they chose healthy marriage, they could provide just one of those activities, and that was it. But we also offered applicants the opportunity, if they wanted to do 2 or more, they wanted to do 2, they could do so. So many of our programs came in offering to do responsible parenting and economic stability, some activity under those larger activity areas. We did have very few that actually came in a single activity of healthy marriage. And that's still sort of the case now. The second cohort, we funded about 59 fatherhood awards between $500,000 to $2.5 million. And in those particular programs, we wrote the forward a little bit different. We then decided to require that all programs integrate all 3 activities. So as you see from the first cohort, we realized, hey, programs, many of them were providing parenting and economic stability together anyway. Let's then integrate that and ask applicants to design a program model that integrated all 3 of those activities, or at least a subset of one of those activities under all 3 of those larger activity areas. And so programs submitted applications where they integrated all 3. In the third cohort, which is not that first and second cohort were not exciting, but for me as an FPS, cohort 3 probably was our most exciting, because we have a lot of data that we were able to collect from this cohort. So in the third cohort, we funded about 42 fatherhood awards between $500,000 to $2.5 million. Again, we required that they integrate all of the 3 allowable activity areas. And from that point, let's see, next slide. We'll be able to show you. Okay, so we, again, with the 3rd cohort, we had the same expectations, additional expectations, such as voluntary placement, partnering with a domestic violence expert, the curriculum, as well as, I think there was one other thing I said, I'm sorry, as well as now, by the time we got to cohort 3, we decided that we would add on child maltreatment awareness and training. Continuous quality improvement, we did not require, but again, sort of like what we did with the curriculum, as the year went on, or as the 5 years progressed, we then encouraged grantees to think about continuous quality improvement. It was not a requirement like child maltreatment, and you'll see when we talk about inform and evaluations, but we began to encourage programs to think about continuous quality improvement and to develop implementation teams. Also in cohort 3, we were developing our new system, our online management information system, which we call Inform. And that went live in 2015. So that was one of the things we required, that participants input their data into Inform, as well as we did grantee specific evaluation plans, and we call them local evaluations. So applicants had to submit local evaluation plans. Next slide. Okay, so now, like I said, in cohort 3, we were able to pull up a lot of information that we were not able to capture in the first 2 cohorts. So we were able to see who is eligible. So their fathers, custodial, non-custodial, adolescents, low income, married, unmarried, incarcerated, or recently released. And so I want to say a little something about mothers in this section. Mothers are not excluded from participating in the program. However, we encourage it's father focused, and programs cannot actively go out and recruit mothers. Now, if a mother hears about the program and says, hey, I'm interested in that fatherhood program, then a program could not turn her away. But programs cannot actively go out and recruit moms as they do with fathers. If they do have a mother participate, she must be eligible, just like the father is. So if a program decides to serve fathers between the ages of 18 to 24, and they live in the zip code of 20720, then a mother would also have to be eligible. She'd have to at least be between the age of 18 to 24 and also lived in the zip code of 20720. We were able to find out why. Why are fathers, or why do participants want to enroll in this program? Desire to learn about being a better parent, to find a job or a better job, improve personal relationships. And then we were really able to narrow down just how many participants are enrolled in these programs. So through year 3, we found out, year 3 of cohort 3, there were about 44,000. And so you see the breakdown of community fathers that participated, close to 2,000 community couples, and about 11,000 of re-entering fathers participated in our program. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Thank you. All right, so some characteristics we found from the data that we were able to receive from Inform is the characteristics. Most of them are male, younger than 35, and they were racially and ethnically diverse. 49% of re-entering fathers and 27% of community fathers were white, non-Hispanic. 20% of re-entering fathers and 40% of community fathers were non-Hispanic, Black, and African American, and 11% of re-entering fathers and 22% of community fathers were Hispanic and Latino. Next slide. We were able to learn a little bit more about relationships. At the start of the program, most of these fathers would say that 25% of them were married, 28 were romantically involved or with a partner on a steady basis. 14% of re-entering fathers were married, 27% were in steady relationships, 10% of re-entering fathers were in on-again and off-again relationships, and 40% of the community and re-entering fathers were not in a relationship. Next slide. Employment. About 54% of community fathers and about 3/4 of re-entering fathers reported not working. And approximately 2/3 of community fathers reported making less than $1,000 in the past month, as did 80% of re-entering fathers. And 3/4 of those fathers had at least a high school education. Next slide. So now, what changes in fatherhood clients' outcomes over time? So this is really exciting portion for me, because all of what I would observe from site visits, meeting fathers in the groups and hearing testimonials, also reading what information the grantees would report in their progress reports, we can now capture with data, which helps support and helps support the funding now and in the future, I believe. So what we have here shows changes that fathers reported from the beginning of the program to the end of the program. So as you see under healthy relationships, better conflict management with community fathers. Now with re-entry fathers, we did not see an increase here. Or so now with responsible parenting, we were able to see that re-entering fathers, at least, community fathers increased their contact, but re-entering fathers did increase their phone or email access to their children. In economic stability, you'll see that there was increased employment, increased in confidence, at least fathers reported these things, less difficulty in paying bills. Now, in the comment on community fathers reported more job barriers, we find interesting because fathers reported at the beginning about 3.1% barriers to employment, but by the end of the program, they reported 3.4% barriers to employment, such as transportation, or not having enough skills or education, or having a criminal record. So we believe that fathers may have perceived more barriers in maintaining employment than when they were unemployed. Changes in well-being, less psychological distress, hopeful about the future. And I think this is encouraging to me, again, since going on site visits and visiting often, hearing fathers within the group share and express how hopeless they felt trying to connect with their children, dealing with mom or other family members, dealing with the court system and other obstacles that just kept them away from their children. So just seeing that fathers did report that they expressed how hopeful they felt after the end of the program, to me is very exciting. Next slide. Okay, so that ends the information we have on cohort 3. Where we are now, we just finished funding an announcement called Fatherhood, Family Focus, Interconnected, Resilient, and Essential, which we affectionately call Fatherhood Fire. We funded 49 fatherhood awards between $500,000 to $1.5. And those were funded, they've just started implementation, or rather they just started in September. So we have the requirements for this program again: healthy marriage, responsible parenting, economic stability. But this time, for this 4th cohort, we added job-driven employment, which is optional, which is in a sense just like programs wanted to do subsidized employment. That's where they would choose to do that, and they would call it job-driven employment. And again, it was optional. It was not required, but if programs wanted to kind of go in that direction, they could. This time we required that the ages would be 18 or more. So none of the programs are serving teen dads. And we added the requirement that the children should be at least 24 years of age or under, and that fathers are actively engaged in their child's life. Case management is another requirement this time around in cohort 4. And we've required local evaluation plans, and that is based on their funding level. Continuous quality improvement this time is required, as well as programs starting up implementation teams. Next slide. All right, and so again, we have the encouragement or required father-focused evidence-based or evidence-informed skill-based curriculum. And this time from 8 hours, we have a minimum of 24 hours. Inform is required again, so all programs must input their data into our system Inform. And we also gave programs a 6-month planning period. Now, I failed to mention that in cohort 3, we also provided actually it was a 9-month planning period. This time we required a 6-month planning period. So all programs were to start April 1st. And so many of the programs now have started, they started a little after April 1st, mainly because Inform was not up and running at the time. And so we did give grantees the option of waiting till, I think it was the 15th, and if not, they could start no later than May 1st. So many of the programs are just starting up, they're up and running, they're in their first cohorts that they're running. So next slide. So since we don't have a lot of data currently, what we do, or what we have heard as an FPS, what I have heard from the many grants that the grants that I have in my queue, some of the challenges they're having since COVID, and that's in-person versus virtual. Many of our programs had to, or they're having to adjust. When they thought everything would be in person, their partners are not ready. They can't get in to work with the participants. So they're starting out virtual. And then you have some programs that are kind of doing a hybrid. They have some virtuals, and then they have some very limited, some in-person programs going on now. Hiring skilled staff, that's been a pretty big challenge. Folks are looking for jobs, but they may not have the skill set. Some folks have been out, and these are just some of the things grantees have said. Some folks have been out not working because of COVID for so long that they're kind of hesitant to come back in and pick up a job that's going to probably require a little more than 8 hours, because as we all know, running programs, it takes a lot of commitment and dedication. And so programs are having some issues in hiring skilled staff. And one of the third things I've heard, again, is sort of like partners struggling to reopen. So we have many programs that are partnered with correctional facilities. And as you know, many of the facilities are still shut down. We have a few that are making headway, and they're able to do virtual classes. But again, that's very few. Programs are still really working hard with correctional facilities to be able to get in to serve fathers. We also have that struggle with schools. So we have a group of grantees that are specifically working with youth in high schools on the healthy marriage side, and many of them are struggling to get into those schools to work with youth. And so they're having to find other ways to get around. So many of them are going to after-school programs. Some of them are working with coaches who have access to the athletes. Many programs, high schools are having basketball, football, soccer practice. And so if you work with the coach has the students with him. And so some programs are connecting that way and able to provide the program to youth in that situation. But even in the fatherhood setting, programs that might be, again, connected with correctional facilities or drug treatment facilities are having a hard time connecting with them. So I just wanted to talk about some of the challenges we've been hearing from this cohort so far. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Seth. I wanted him to talk a little bit about HMRF's learning agenda. Thank you, Seth.
Sure. Absolutely. And Tanya, thank you so much for that very broad, very comprehensive overview of what our programming has done over the last 14, 15 years, and where we're going with this current cohort of this current 5-year cohort. So I want to talk about how we have enveloped this this program with all kinds of performance measure and research and evaluation activities, really injected learning into all facets of our work. And the reason is because Congress and the public has, they've given us a lot of money, and we need to demonstrate what we are doing with it. More importantly to me than just demonstrating what we're doing, we need to learn and to grow and to be bigger and better every year. And so that's why we have to complement the comprehensive programming, we have a really robust research agenda, learning agenda. I want to note that we call this a learning agenda as opposed to an evaluation agenda or a research agenda, because we don't see these projects as an opportunity to say thumbs up or thumbs down to something, but rather as an opportunity to learn and to grow. That's really the purpose. What you see before you here is the generic responsible fatherhood logic model. We have a generic template for responsible fatherhood and for our healthy marriage programs. And we developed this so that all programs could have a basic structure that they could use as they think about what their programming does. So, the parts of this logic model, if you've ever worked with logic models, are pretty evident. You have your inputs, you have your activities, and you have your outcomes. But I want to kind of point out a couple of things here. The first is that the largest activity is, of course, our program-specific activities, but we don't lose track of the fact that there's also marketing and recruitment and retention that has to be part of any program activity. You have to get the dads, and then you have to keep the dads in the programming. Under the program-specific activities box, there's also the case management box. Case management is one of the required activities in healthy marriage. Now, it's not in the legislation, but under our funding opportunity announcements, we require case management. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. I also want to point out the 3 blue boxes in the outcomes. Those are the 3 legislative required activities: healthy relationships and marriage, parenting, and economic stability. And we expect to see positive outcomes in all 3 areas because all programs are supposed to address all 3 areas. Could we go to the next slide, please? So as Tanya has mentioned, we have a performance measurement management information system that we call INFORM, the Information Family Outcomes Reporting and Management System. This is a standardized group of measures that all grantees must collect and report to us. And what's cool is we have this web-based INFORM system to collect the performance measures. So in short, the grantees have to report the services that they provide, and the participants participate in 3 surveys throughout their programming. The participants complete what's called an applicant characteristics survey, kind of like an enrollment survey. They complete what's called an entrance survey, which is kind of the survey at the beginning of their first class. And they complete an exit survey, which is taken at the end of the last class. So by grantees submitting all of the information on what they do in terms of the services that they provide, the attendance of the participants, the individual service contacts or the case management contacts. By combining that with the surveys from the participants, we are able to understand quite a bit of what's happening in our programming. In fact, what Tanya presented earlier, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 slides back, about what fathers look like as they exit a program, that's only possible because we have this really robust, really extensive management information system. We combine that performance measurement work with some evaluation. So we have federally led impact evaluations, and we also have grantee-initiated evaluations. So the federally led impact evaluations, basically our office has hired, through a research office in ACF, we've hired 2 different contractors to work with a subset of grantees to evaluate some specific things that we want to learn about. One of the federally led impact evaluations is focused on healthy marriage programming, and that evaluation is called SIMMER. The one on responsible fatherhood is called SIRF. You know, in the federal government can't do anything well if it isn't an acronym that sounds like something, right? So what SIRF is going to do, it's going to evaluate the effectiveness of different father recruitment and father retention approaches in programs. So it's not looking at whether the programming itself is effective, which we need to know, and we have learned about. I'll talk about that in a second. But we need to know how to recruit the dads and how to keep the dads. This evaluation is going to have a random assignment impact design to tell us which are the different methods that actually get the dads in the door and keep them. Grantees can also conduct their own randomized controlled trials or descriptive evaluations, and we call these in shorthand local evaluations. These evaluations are focused on a question that the grantee wants to learn about. This time we have, about 80 grantees of the, 110 grantees that we have now. 80 of them, about 70%, are doing their own evaluations, which is pretty cool. All right, so if we could go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about what we're learning. Like I said, this is a learning agenda, and so we want to actually learn something. So, okay, let's get my notes up here. So in the first link on this slide, we have data snapshots from the last cohort. And indeed, some of the statistics that Tanya talked about before
We got you, Seth.
Really interesting information, though, by the way. The data is the piece that we are all wondering about. So thank you so much for spending so much time going over it. Really appreciate it.
Great. As I said earlier too, we are very excited about that data. Are you back up, Seth? Oh.
I am back up. I apologize. I don't know. My phone just decided to hang up. There we are. Well, thank you for your patience. I do think that with COVID, we've all learned how to roll with technological bumps a lot better than we did before. And I appreciate all of your patience while my phone just decided to hang up. I don't know why. Okay, so The snapshots that are linked at the first bullet there talk about what fathers look like when they leave our programs, but they also talk about what kind of programming we're actually providing. For example, all of our grantees hire staff. Turns out that program staff typically have at least a bachelor's degree, but generally not more than a bachelor's degree. Turns out that staff turnover is generally higher for staff that work directly with clients, such as workshop facilitators. In fact, in responsible fatherhood programs, about a quarter of facilitators turn over each year. So that's an important statistic to think about. You know, when you're designing a program, how can you keep your facilitators engaged so they don't leave? Or if you anticipate that they're going to leave, how do you make sure that there's a good stream of trained facilitators coming in? We learn from this data that almost all fathers who enroll in these programs participate in workshops, and those that participate get about 25 hours of workshops. That's a lot of workshop hours. All grantees offer workshops in parenting, and clients typically participate in our programs for about 5 to 6 weeks. And that's another important statistic to think about. If when you're designing a program, and if you expect the dad to be enrolled for 6 months, he might not be enrolled for 6 months, but you might be able to get him for a month and a half or 2. We also learned about the case management contacts that fathers have. We learned about the topics that fathers tend to discuss during those case management contacts. So those tend to be related to job and career advancement. They tend to be related to being assessed for something such as like a needs assessment or assessment for job readiness. And those case management contacts tend to focus on parenting related questions that a father might have. The second link here is from a qualitative, a collection of qualitative information from 4 grantees in the 2011 cohort. What's really cool about this link is if you go here, you can actually watch videos of fathers that participated in the programs and the facilitators that managed those programs. Very, very cool. This link has all kinds of information on how responsible fatherhood programs work with fathers that they personally develop so that they can improve or reaffirm their parenting and their co-parenting. How the fatherhood programs work on romantic relationships and marriage. How the fatherhood programs work on economic stability, and also on financial support of their kids. The last link here is the results of an impact study of 4 responsible fatherhood programs. Now, there have been impact evaluations of responsible fatherhood programs, many to date. This was the first major federally funded evaluation of our responsible fatherhood programs. And it found that of the grantees, the 4 grantees that were evaluated, for the fathers that were enrolled compared to the control group, they were more nurturing with their kids. They engaged in more age-appropriate activities with their kids, and they were more continuously employed than the fathers that were part of the control group. We still have room to grow. The programs that were evaluated didn't improve the father's in-person contact with their kids. It didn't improve co-parenting. So there are ways that we need to improve. But it is reassuring to know that, hey, you know what? We can make a difference. We have something to build on. We have somewhere to go. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it off to Tanya to finish out the presentation, and then we'll be around for Q&A.
Great, thank you, Seth. So, you can link onto any of those from the previous slide. You'll be able to pull up those reports, which I think you'll find very interesting. So finally, I wanted to provide for you at least a grantee sitemap. Here we have our Fatherhood Fire grants. They're in red. And I believe we also have some Healthy Start programs that are part of that as well, and marriage. And so you'll see we have all of the programs. We have our Healthy Marriage, our 2 Healthy Marriage programs, which is Frameworks, which those programs are serving couples or adult individuals. And then you'll see in sort of this bluish color, Relationship Education Advancement, Ready for Life, where programs are serving youth, and they're specifically serving youth in high schools and or in alternate areas in the community, but they are only serving youth. So it's a combination, but the red outlines those Fatherhood Fire programs that we have throughout the country. Next slide. Wanted to talk real quick. Please, if you get an opportunity, please go on to fatherhood.gov. That's our clearinghouse where they have resources as well as they have a number of resources and information from much of the work that's being done in the field of fatherhood. And so I think you would enjoy that. You may be able to see some of our media clips through that particular link as well on that website. Next slide. And so now we are open for questions and answers. Seth, if you would join me again. If we have any questions from anyone out in the field, please shoot them at us. We're here.
Tanya, I'll join you for as long as my phone doesn't back out.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, thank you both. This was fantastic. And I know that folks, your brains might be stimulating with questions. And I'm glad that you ended pointing folks to the clearinghouse, because many folks out there are familiar with Kenneth Braswell, because he's been a partner in our fatherhood work for many years. And he's certainly working with us here at the TA and Support Center. And so folks would recognize his name. But again, he's over there at that clearinghouse, which is an awesome, awesome resource. So folks, you have questions, both Seth and Tanya are here to answer them. So feel free to shoot them at them. All right, I've waited for the appropriate time of silence. And so let me try to kick some folks off. I know that in 2019, when you got ready, the proposals came out for this last cohort, there were several Healthy Start communities. And I don't know if folks on the call were part of these conversations at your site, but there were several Healthy Start programs that wanted to submit applications. But again, due to the time under COVID, it was really a tough time. And so, yeah, early 2020 on that. And so I know that there was a lot of interest around the fire grants. And so that's why we wanted to make sure today happens. But if you are out there and were part of one of those Healthy Start programs that was interested, but just didn't have enough time to understand the fire grants, this is a great time to ask questions right from Seth and Tanya, because they've done a great job laying them out. But people saw a lot of alignment, Seth and Tanya, with the work, because again, although fatherhood is a required component within Healthy Start, there's not a whole lot of money attached to serving dads. And so these programs are really working closely with their community partners to be able to provide services to their fathers. Not all Healthy Starts can provide case management, as an example. And so they really have to find partners to do that. And so a grant like this is great to have, because then you can provide that type of case management. The healthy relationships is a key part of Healthy Start work with fathers. And so I'm hoping that this is stimulating a lot of ideas for these our grantees that are on the call today. So I wanted to try to push you all, those of you that may have been interested in applying for this grant or working with those that do have the grant. Do you have any questions related to that? Do you see this alignment? Are there aspects of this program that really stick out for you? I know that many fathers also that are enrolled in Healthy Start across the country. Incarceration is a huge issue all across the country with our fathers, either incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. So again, this is a great time to ask questions because, as Tanya emphasizes, they have some data they can talk about what they've learned.
You know, Ken, just to piggyback on what you said, our grantees in many ways have really just started implementing. The planning period ended March 31st, April 1st. And so there may be a fire grantee in your community that you could partner with now. So even if you weren't part of that, application, you could partner together now. Just thinking off the top of my head, there are ways that you could call up the fire grantee and say, hey, if you have guys that, they have a wife or they have a girlfriend who's expecting, give us their names. And if we have a guy that, would really be interested in parenting classes or really would be interested in economic stability services, we'll send that guy's name to you. That's one way that at least sharing recruiting ideas could be really helpful in terms of you meeting your recruitment goals and us meeting ours, and really more importantly than that, getting these services to these guys so that their families can be strong.
Yeah, so that partnership idea, that sounds perfect. And I see some responses in the chat to that effect. Great idea. So aligning yourself with these fire grants, building partnerships, and then having these referral exchanges sounds awesome. Because I think your required age is Healthy Starts serves fathers with children up to the age of 18 months. So again, those young fathers especially. But yeah, and they have, many of you all, feel free to talk. Certainly, I know some of them have great additional services that, again, the fire fathers could also benefit from. And many of them are trained in 24/7 Dad. Some of them are master trained. They've just received this other training last week. So there's definitely some other community-based community support services that fathers that are in fire certainly could benefit from being part of a Healthy Start. So I don't know if anyone wants to talk about some of the things that you're doing. We've shared with Seth and Tanya that there's variation across the country in what you all are doing around fatherhood. So if anyone wants to share kind of what you're doing, that'll be helpful information for Seth and Tanya as well. Just share your location and see if they can think of anyone that may be in your area anyway.
Do you mind if I chime in, or does anyone? So this is Chichiobi. I'm from Detroit, but we have around 5 different Healthy Start grant recipients in the state of Michigan, and we are all in partnership. We exchange data. We use it to our advantage to glean information and data and strategies from each other. And so collectively we met, and so that's from Detroit, Flint, Michigan, Kalamazoo, Michigan, Rapids, Michigan, and our Upper Peninsula, which is a Native American population. We collectively got together and applied for the fire grant. But I believe that this information is really would have made us a stronger applicant. We did not receive the funding, but I believe this, just this summary and understanding what's required from us would have made us better applicants. There was a grant the grant was given to an agency, Grand Rapids. And so we hope to we talked to them a little bit just to and went on their website to see what they were doing different that we weren't doing. And they were past recipients of the fire grants. So I think that also gave them some credibility as well. But yeah, the data collection piece is something that, hey, we didn't get the grant last time, but how can we position ourselves for next go round? What data pieces exactly are we supposed to, would be beneficial? Because we collect so much really rich data now for our performance outcomes and for our measures. But what data pieces are you guys really looking for? Because I know that you get a larger amount actually by collecting data. I think that was on the grant, that if you show that you're collecting data, you can get the full amount of dollars. And so that was something that appealed to us, but we didn't know if we were getting that data or not. So, but now looking at this presentation, it seems as though the data that we collect in Healthy Start is very similar to the data that's collected in FIRE. And we actually, all of the Healthy Starts would be eligible for the larger funding because that's data that we already collect. So that was really interesting to know from just some of the pieces that you guys showed that you were collecting. And then another thing that I think that could have strengthened our grant was really the promotion of marriages. We really don't do that in Healthy Start. We definitely work on co-parenting. Because we work with moms so closely. And then so working with dads, it's like, okay, let's figure out this, what I call the space in between. So we would love to hear more about how some programs really work on promoting marriage. Do you guys use curriculums? Like, how do you promote marriage and healthy marriages and the sustaining of marriages? That was a lot, but.
So maybe I could comment on a few things. So in terms of the grantees that we fund in Michigan, I believe there's only one. You're right, Grand Rapids, but it's not a FIRE grantee. It's what we call a Ready for Life grantee. So it's a healthy marriage program for youth. It is a repeat grantee, Bethany Christian Services, out of Grand Rapids. I will say that the data that grantees collect is not, when one becomes a Healthy Marriage and Responsible Fatherhood grantee, they have access to this management information system. So it's not something that people have to buy. It's something that they get as part of being a grantee. It is true that as part of this past competition, applicants needed to demonstrate that they were implementing this type of programming and achieving outcomes. And so I think, I'm not as familiar with the Healthy Start performance measurement system or any evaluation that's going on, but if you are collecting that could be exactly the type of information that's needed for a grant application. And I'm trying to think about the last point you made. You're talking about the grantees in Michigan, collecting data. There's something else, I'm sorry.
Marriages, what kind of, are there any curriculums or?
There are. Mm-hmm. Yep, so for some fathers who are in relationships, they can complete a program like Within Our Reach or PrEP, which is so Within Our Reach, which is a version of PrEP, and PrEP is kind of a standard marriage and relationship enhancement program. So that's available for couples. But there's also a program called Within My Reach, which is for fathers who may not be with a current partner, and it teaches them about how to be prepared for their next relationship. So there are a few curricula out there, and I'm trying to think about whether our website actually mentions the specific curricula. So I know there have been websites in the past that have listed the curricula, but one of them was just decommissioned like a year ago. So I can think about other places that you could look for healthy marriage curriculum.
While Seth is looking for that, are there any other questions or thoughts you have? I know we're winding up. So I'll put a couple more out there that I know that are related to the Healthy Start community, Seth and Tanya. And one is, I think it's important. I happen to be around when these Healthy Marriage grants started. And there was a reason why it was really around healthy marriage. And so if you could speak to that, because I know in the early days, there was lots of resistance to that whole force of healthy marriage, but people need to understand why it was that. And then number two, just any thoughts that you're having as we as a country are looking at equity and the impact of racism, because as we race toward Healthy People 2030 and the goals there around infant mortality, which affects community health and well-being, just wanted to know if you guys are having conversations around equity and the impact of racism, especially when we come to mass incarceration, the United States, incarcerating more people than anywhere else in the world, and those people being mostly people of color and African Americans and Latinos in particular. So why promoting and pushing marriage in the beginning, and then equity or racism?
Sure. So, Tanya, do you mind if I talk about the marriage issue? Okay. So in the 1990s and the early 2000s, there was emerging research that demonstrated that children raised with married parents had better outcomes than children that were raised with other in other family types. It needs to be mentioned that in the same breath that children raised in other family types, the majority of those children had good outcomes too, like the vast majority. So at the same time that I'm saying that, there was research that was emerging that was showing that children had better outcomes if they were being raised in married parent households, the research also showed that most kids, regardless of family type, had positive outcomes. That being said, when children have two adults present in the household, which happens most often when there is a committed relationship, but can happen in other ways too. Children have two adults that they can depend on. And so in the early 2000s, there was an effort to implement what was called the Healthy Marriage Initiative. And that culminated in the funding of, in the authorization and the funding of the Healthy Marriage and the Responsible Fatherhood programs. Because it was stemming from that research, the words healthy marriage were really entwined into the programming here. That being said, the head of our agency in the mid-2000s was really clear that we were not emphasizing that everyone should get married, nor that people should stay in marriages that were unhealthy. There's a real emphasis on the word healthy. And there was actually a lot of work done on, how do you quantify, how do you delineate what is a healthy marriage versus an unhealthy marriage? And there was a lot of work that ACF put out, our agency put out, talking about, if there is domestic violence going on, if there's infidelity going on, this is most likely not a healthy relationship and things need to change. As we moved from the 2000s into the 2010s, there's some movement towards softening the lines of healthy marriage and thinking about healthy relationships. So today, we still need to talk about healthy marriage because it's in the legislation, it's part of our authorization, and it's until Congress tells us that something's different, it is part of our authorizing legislation, and so we have to honor that that's what Congress is funding us to do. But we also understand that there are many different types of families and that we really want to promote healthy relationships as far as possible. That's kind of the genesis of healthy marriage and how we got to where we are today. And darn it, Ken, I forgot your second question. just like I forgot what's the second
Just
question.
concerning equity and the impact of racism.
Oh.
I know it may not be a lot, but just if there are conversations about that as we move forward.
Oh, yes, absolutely. There are conversations about that in our programs. So there are conversations that I can't talk about because they relate to funding. And so, you know, I can't talk about where we might go with regard to equity in responsible fatherhood programming and healthy marriage programming, but I can. I had a thorough conversation about it on Friday and something about it yesterday. And I know that we're going to have conversations about it going forward. And indeed, all of our current, you know, budget proposals have a lens of whether and how our programs can better address the issue of equity for the people that we serve, especially for, but not limited to, Black Americans, Black fathers, Black youth. I don't know, Tanya, if you would add anything to that.
No, not at all. I think in terms of separate conversations with grantees and talking about, I have not had any with my grantees. All of the FPSs have monthly meetings with their grantees, and sometimes we cluster them. But I think it's something, I think reentry is one area that I think conversation will start to kind of pick up a little bit, but nothing has really taken place so far yet with grantees. This is just directly with grantees.
Thank you both. That is great. All right, well, thank you again for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Again, lots of resources, lots of, again, going exploring the websites. There's much more to learn, and so we encourage you all to do that. And certainly you'll have access to the recording later, but certainly feel free to access those resources that they provided today. And we look forward to continue to build our partnership, because I think, again, something that came up today and something we've talked about even in our planning for this with you all, and that is really to just have this alignment and partnership. And so we'll continue to build on that even outside of presentations like this, because I think it's just important for us as, you know, government entities to ensure that we are aligned and working on behalf of America's families together. So we really want to promote that partnership as well. So thank you so much. Turn it back to you, Denisha. I think you're gonna close this out.
Yes, thank you, Ken. And again, thank you, Tanya and Seth. That was a really good presentation. As you can see, it's very helpful for those on the call. So we're just going to close out. Lisa, we can hop to the next slide. So as we all know, this is our reminder for the month of May. So you can skim it now, but we also have it posted on our EPIC website. The link is found there. So you can find useful deadlines that are coming up and any events that we have going on. Next slide, please. So as Ken mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, NPCL is hosting their International Fatherhood Conference between June 9th and June 10th. If you all would like to sign up, we urge you to scan this image on your phone. So if you pull out your phone, go to the camera function and just hover over that QR code. You can fill out a survey and we will then admit you to register for the conference, or you'll see Tess just added in the chat there, the website. So you can either click that link or use your phone to copy that QR code. So we are sponsoring the attendance for our fatherhood coordinators and our fatherhood staff. So please take advantage of this opportunity. As I heard, it's going to be amazing. Next slide, please. And then another opportunity available to our grantees is a one-year license for the Fathering in 15 curriculum hosted by NFI. So if you would like that as well, please scan the image right on that screen, or like I said, Tess also dropped that link right in the chat. So feel free to do either. And it'll be a short survey just to get the information down for record. And then NFI will follow up with any information you need to create that site for the curriculum. And you can also learn more on our website. Next slide, please. This is our contact information for Michael Mooney, which again, like Ken mentioned before, was unable to join our call today, but if you do have any questions, the contact information is there. We will also post these slides too if you need to refer back if you need any questions to be answered. Next slide, please. And again, our HRSA website, if you have any other questions or want to learn more about anything going on. Next slide. As for our evaluation, we are pulling out a poll right now. I do ask that you all please take a moment. I believe it's not too many questions, about 7 questions just to ask about your satisfaction for today's meeting. We love to host these Fatherhood Talk Tuesdays, and we want to know how they're benefiting you all. So please take the next few minutes to complete the survey right on the poll. So you'll see that window pop up just right when you're done. Just submit at the very end. So we'll hold for a quick minute, and after that, feel free to sign right off. So I'll give folks a second just to read through the poll. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns, you can always chat us right now at Zoom, or we'll have our information at the last slide with any, if you wanted to email us with any questions, you could do so as well. And going on to the next slide, as you all finish up that poll, is just a reminder of our next Fatherhood Talk Tuesday. So June is Men's Health Month. So we want to make sure that we cover that in our next talk. So definitely make sure to have your calendar updated for our talk. It's around the same time each month. So June 8th from 3 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Our topic for next month will be Men's Health Month. So again, do not feel rushed. Please feel free to continue with the survey. Just as we ended our last slide, as always, thank you all for joining us, spending time with us, and we look forward to seeing you on June 8th.